Hanse. Good afternoon. I'm Krisanach Kate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The province of Manitoba is denying responsibility for the wrongful convictions of two Anishinaabe men, Alan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson. The province is arguing that the Winnipeg Police and the City of Winnipeg were at fault for sending the two men to prison almost 50 years ago. Sierra Bettens has more.
Alan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson are two of four Anishinaabe men convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the 1973 murder of a Winnipeg restaurant owner. In July 2023, Anderson and Woodhouse from the Penematang First Nation, north of the city, were acquitted of the murder they were wrongfully convicted of. In April 2024, they filed a lawsuit against Winnipeg, the province, and Canada and Manitoba's Attorney General. In a statement of defense filed last Friday, the province argued the convictions were caused by false confessions obtained by the Winnipeg Police Service. They say the province and its Attorney General are not responsible for the wrongful convictions, arguing the police and the City of Winnipeg are to blame. Nigon Sinclair, a columnist and associate professor at the University of Manitoba, says while the province's response was unfortunate, he wasn't surprised by it.
But often what governments do or institutions do, private industries certainly do this all the time, is they deny the claim, try to pick apart the elements of the claim that they feel have some soft areas or perhaps don't have the amount of evidence necessary to be able to make the claim. And then this is where the negotiation starts to begin.
Clarence Woodhouse, also from Penematang, was acquitted of the murder in October 2024. His brother, Russell Woodhouse, was also convicted but died in 2011. A posthumous application for his acquittal was filed on his behalf. The plaintiff's lawyer, James Lockyer, told the Winnipeg Free Press that Clarence Woodhouse will likely join the civil case, but that Russell's estate isn't eligible to join. APTN has reached out to Lockyer for comment. Sinclair says that systemic factors and racism within the justice system must be taken into account.
The flagrant disregard, the misappropriate use of force and policy, and also the continuing bias and racism within the justice system, and in particular in this case, the police, the Winnipeg Police Service, is baffling, but yet unsurprising in the ways in which this systemically continues to happen time and time again.
The province acknowledged that Alan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson were victims of, quote, a miscarriage of justice, unquote, but says it was a federal court system's job to determine whether their confession was voluntary and accurate. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A first-degree murder trial came to an unexpected end as the defendants pleaded guilty to the lesser offense of manslaughter on Thursday in Saskatoon. Summer Sky Henry and Cheyenne Petitus were charged with first-degree murder in the death of 30-year-old Megan Gallagher. The Gallagher family cried in the courtroom, putting their arms around each other as Henry and Petitus made their pleas. CTV's Laura Woodward has more.
The Gallagher family leaving the courthouse with more questions than answers.
It's bizarre.
Bizarre, Brian Gallagher says how two women facing first-degree murder charges in his daughter's death could plead guilty to the lesser offense of manslaughter. When Summer Sky Henry and Cheyenne Petitus made their pleas, Gallagher says he felt sick.
I was sick to the stomach. I've got a strong stomach, but this one has really got me.
30-year-old Megan Gallagher was reported missing in September 2020. This surveillance footage from a convenience store showing one of the last times she was seen alive. 2 years later, police found her remains south of Prince Albert near the village of St. Louis. A total of 9 people have been charged in her death. Evidence in Petitus and Henry's proceedings are under a publication ban, with 2 pending jury trials.
No idea.
The Gallagher family says they were given no explanation for why Petitus and Henry's charges were downgraded.
How it gets derailed like this is, I know it doesn't make sense to the average person either. It doesn't make sense to me.
The case is scheduled to return next week for victim impact statements. Laura Woodward, CTV News, Saskatoon.
The case of a 24-year-old Indigenous woman's death is now under investigation by the Office of Police Complaints Commission in BC. Chelsea Porman was first reported missing in September of 2020. Her body was later discovered outside of an abandoned home on Vancouver's west side. Police ruled it as not suspicious. However, her mother, Sheila Porman, filed a complaint against Vancouver police in how they investigated her daughter's case. The OPCC has opened an investigation into allegations of neglect of duty and appointed a retired judge to oversee it. After nearly 2 weeks of extensive searching, the search for a missing Inuk woman has been officially exhausted. 51-year-old Elizabeth Jararius was last seen on December 30th in Nain, Labrador. Nain RCMP received a missing person report on January 4th of 2025. Nain Ground Search and Rescue and community volunteers scoured the community and surrounding area. As part of the search, a drone was used to conduct an aerial search, and an underwater viewing device was also used to search the dock area in Nain, as well as a remote-operated vehicle search on the water's edge. Jararius remains a missing person, and the investigation will remain open. Anyone with information is asked to call Nain RCMP at 709-922-2862. For more than a decade, First Nation groups from across the country were united in fixing the racism in the on-reserve child welfare system. Recently, a majority voted down a multi-billion-dollar child reform deal during an Assembly of First Nations meeting in Calgary last year. Now, First Nations are split on what to do next. The Anishinaabe, Aski Nation, and the Chiefs of Ontario are now negotiating their own agreement on child welfare reform with the federal government. They say they have been mandated by their chiefs to make their own informed decisions about their children without being required to consult with other parties. Their joint statement was made in response to the First Nations Child and Caring Society. It filed a new legal motion with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. Executive Director Cindy Blackstock said they do not want to interfere with Ontario's negotiations, but will try to get Indigenous Services Canada back to the table with chiefs outside of Ontario. To know more about this, you can read Karen Pugley's story over on our website at aptnnews.ca. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs has expressed its support for the Barons River First Nation after the community lost its arena to a fire on Thursday. News from Barons River Chief Hartley Everett described the arena as a center of joy, belonging, and opportunity for our youth. In a Friday press release, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Acting Grand Chief Betsy Kennedy said, quote, "Though this loss is deeply felt, we know the resilience of Barons River First Nation will guide them in rebuilding." APTN reached out to the fire response team but was unable to connect with them. Those who wish to support rebuilding efforts may contact Barons River Chief and Council by visiting baronsriver.ca. Premier of British Columbia David Eby returned from a meeting with all the premiers from across Canada and says that what President-elect Donald Trump is threatening to do with tariffs for Canada is equal to economic war. At a press conference in Vancouver on Thursday, Premier Eby stated that if these tariffs happen after President-elect Trump gets in, it will mean over 170,000 people will lose their jobs just in BC alone, and important sectors will be shut down as a result of the tariffs. However, Eby wants to assure everyone that his government will do everything they can to try to convince decision makers on Capitol Hill that tariffs are a bad decision for both sides of the border.
I want people to know that we're going to do everything we can to do two things. One is to respond and to make sure that people who are inflicting this on us, that they feel it back and they get the message about how important it is that we work together, not at odds, but also that we're going to be there for them, that we're going to structure government in a way to respond to this new reality, that we understand it's a new reality, and we're going to make sure we deliver for them. And so it is serious language, but this is a very serious situation.
Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, announced his intentions to run in the upcoming Liberal leadership race to replace outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Hundreds of supporters gathered in Edmonton to hear Carney's official declaration of his intention to become the next Prime Minister. He says his priority will be improving the economy. He says he believes that even with a large lead by the Conservatives in the polls, Liberals can win the next general election that is supposed to happen on or before October 20th. Carney took swings at federal leader Pierre Poilievre and Alberta Premier Daniel Smith.
In these times, sending Pierre Poilievre to negotiate with Donald Trump is the worst possible idea. I can think of one other politician I might not send. It just came to me in the last 24 hours.
We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about the Kienan Indigenous Theatre Festival making its debut in Winnipeg. Welcome back. This weekend in Winnipeg, the Kienan Indigenous Theatre Festival makes its debut. Kienan is a Southern Michif word meaning us. Our intern reporter Tyler Shingus takes us to the Prairie Theatre Exchange to see what's shaping up.
I just wanted to say welcome.
Charlene Van Buchenhout's vision to create a safer space for Indigenous artists has come to fruition. It's the inaugural festival for Kianan, and it's an Indigenous theatre festival to celebrate, acknowledge, honor, and showcase our Indigenous talent here in this area of Manitoba from the past, present, and for the future.
Artists and creatives alike will share their work and make new connections through readings, workshops, and play presentations. Creatives are those who create new works, particularly in the arts, through the imaginative process. Métis artist Katie German is a director for one of the plays at the festival.
It's, I think, extremely important. We've got the biggest Indigenous population in Canada per capita, and so I think having an Indigenous theatre festival in Winnipeg is so necessary.
In Canada. Yeah.
In a world where it is hard to find authentic representation, this festival gives artists the chance to showcase and celebrate their work, as well as make new connections.
There wasn't a space to do Indigenous work when I was a kid, and looking on the stages and trying to see myself reflected, I didn't have that. And so having this space to be able to have people come and see and build the community of actors that are up and coming, and also honor the actors that did pave the way to be able to do all this work, that's what it is.
Ian Ross created Farewell nearly 30 years ago, a comedic drama about a First Nations effort to self-govern after their chief leaves to gamble in Las Vegas. Ross, who is Métis and Ojibwe, is back to share that piece of Indigenous theatre history with the newer generation. He says festivals such as Kianan are important for emerging artists in theatre to get their feet wet.
There always is, right? And you got to start somewhere, and I'm really glad that they've started this, and the work Caroline's done. And as far as where it can go, the sky's the limit.
As a Métis from the Red River Nation, Charlene opted to honor her heritage and drew inspiration from the Michif language to name the festival. The Kianan Festival will be happening throughout this weekend at the Prairie Theatre Exchange. I'm Tyler Shingus with APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, Tyler. For all of our sports fans out there, APTN will host another 6 games for Hockey Night in Canada this season. Here's a preview from our TR Wheatley.
For 5 hockey seasons now, APTN's brought you Cree commentary.
That's it! Wow!
In addition to the Cree games this year, 3 games will be brought to you in Inuktitut, including a Montreal versus Toronto game that Pujuat Kuzagak is already preparing for. I'm TR Wheatley. Coming up tonight, a rundown of the games APTN is airing, and we'll hear more from Pujuat about what this means to him.
Thank you, TR. We now want to tell you about this week's web poll questions. Over on our website, we ask, should Canada negotiate child welfare reforms at a national level or with individual regions? Your answers are national, regional, both, or unsure. Our next question is the Indigenous Languages Act enough to sustain Indigenous languages? Your answers are yes, no, or unsure. And our third question, are checkpoints a good way to protect band members from human trafficking? Yes, no, or unsure. And you can go to our website at www.aptnnews.ca to cast your ballot. We will post the results next week. Indigenous journalists in Canada will have a new united voice under the new organization, Indigenous Media Association of Canada, or IMAC. We'll speak with the interim president when we come back. Stay with us. On the east, Charlottetown -7, Halifax sunny and -4. Sun and Cartwright at -9, La Grande River partly cloudy -10. Saguenay -6, Quebec City -7. Partly cloudy in Toronto -1, Sault Ste. Marie -4. Big Trout Lake -12, Sioux Lookout -1. The Paw -18, Norway House -15. Sunny and Gimli at -9, Princess Harbor -10. North Battleford -16, Yorkton -12. -20 in Buffalo Narrows, Stony Rapids -29. -11 in Peace River, Fort McMurray -15. -16 in Calgary, Edmonton -7. 5 in Campbell River, Penticton 2. Fort Nelson -17, Smithers -2. -32 in Old Crow, Dawson -25. -21 in Wrigley and Sun, Wati -27. Fort McPherson -16, Inuvik -21. -30 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield -35. And -16 in Iqaluit, Nagulik -33. Thank you for staying with us. 5 veteran Indigenous journalists formed an association to amplify and protect Indigenous journalism in Canada. It is called the Indigenous Media Association of Canada, or IMAC. One of those veteran journalists is Carrie Benjo with Eagle Feather News in Saskatchewan. She is currently the interim president of IMAC. She recently spoke to us from Saskatchewan. Carrie Benjo, thank you so much for chatting with us today. My first question is, can you tell us why you didn't want to join another journalism organization, especially the Indigenous Journalists Association?
I have a lot of respect for the current organization like the IJA and the CAJ, but with the IJA, I don't think it has, well, it doesn't have the capacity right now to advocate for journalists on this side of the border. We have very specific needs here in Canada, and the IJA, although it does really great work in the United States, it really doesn't have anything that is specifically Canadian. We did discuss initially maybe forming a northern chapter, but right now IJA is not equipped to even meet those needs.
And Carrie, anything else to add with regards to why IMAC was formed now?
Well, I think the time is right. You know, like there isn't any specific reason other than the fact that, you know, in 2023 there was the IJ had a national conference in Winnipeg, and it brought together so many Indigenous journalists, and we began talking. And about a year after that, we started talking about, you know, wouldn't it be great if we had the opportunity to meet, collaborate, and just have something similar here in Canada, because there isn't anything. There is nothing that unites all journalists and broadcasters and storytellers. There isn't anything right now. And being in that environment where it brought together so many Indigenous journalists, it was such a rich environment, and I think we need that. We need that unity, because so many of us work alone. We work remotely, and we don't have access to a lot of information. And so this is about building community. It's about sharing resources. It's about networking, and it's about, you know, building that capacity to be independent storytellers.
Carrie, with the changing landscape such as cutbacks and layoffs, can you explain how IMAC will support Indigenous journalists and Indigenous-owned media outlets?
I think it's really important right now to have an organization, a national organization that pushes specifically for Indigenous people to have the opportunity, space, and culturally sensitive space to tell our stories our own way. And I think that there is power in numbers, and we need to have an equal seat at the table when it comes to lobbying the government for access to funding, having input when special projects are announced. We need to be at those tables, at those decision-making tables when policies are made, when funding is being allocated. And I think right now it is imperative that we stand up and we have a strong voice when all these things are taking place.
Mm-hmm. And Carrie, finally, part of the mandate of IMAC is to advocate for Indigenous journalism as an inherent right to traditional storytelling. Can you explain what that means and how that would be achieved?
I think what we want to do at IMAC is to really drive force that idea that journalism is not new. It has always been with us. We have always had this as part of our culture. It is about sharing knowledge. It's about education, and it's something that we need to promote and have our own Indigenous sovereignty when it comes to media. It's just as important as everything else. Our storytelling, our stories are equally important. They're equally valid. They do so much for us as Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I got tongue-tied there.
No, that's quite all right. Carrie Benjel, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday, January 17th. We're back again with more stories for your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, Kwana Miigwech, Masicho, hi hi. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Ekse.